The battlefield is silent now. It was the greatest army the world had ever seen. And now, it is a graveyard. A woman walks through the dead. She is not hurrying. She is not weeping. She moves through the field the way a person moves when they already know how this ends. Because she is the one who ended it.
She stops. She has found the man she was looking for. Among tens of thousands of dead, she has found the one body that matters. She draws her blade. What happens next is not revenge. It is a promise being kept. This is the story of the one person who ever made Cyrus the Great lose.
Before we tell you who that woman was, you need to understand who he killed. His name was Cyrus. In 20 years, he had done something no one in history had done before him. He had taken the Medes, the empire his own grandfather ruled, and made it his. Then he turned west. He found Croesus, the king of Lydia, the richest man alive, the man whose name is still used today when we say someone is as rich as Croesus. Gone. Then, Babylon. Babylon, the greatest city in the world. Walls so thick that 2 chariots could race side by side along the top. A city that had stood for 1,000 years. Cyrus walked in without a fight. When it was done, Cyrus ruled an empire that stretched from the edge of India in the east to the shores of the Mediterranean in the west. If you stood at one border of his empire and started walking, you would walk for months before you reached the other side. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen. No one in all of recorded history had ever built anything like it.
But here is the part that most people don't know. The people Cyrus conquered, they didn't hate him. When he took Babylon, he didn't burn it. He didn't enslave the people. He walked into the temples, bowed to the local gods, and announced that everyone was free to practice their own religion. When you have never lost, something happens to you. It stops feeling like luck. It stops feeling like strategy. It starts to feel like destiny. By 530 BC, Cyrus had ruled for nearly 30 years. He had fought war after war and won every single one. His advisors worshipped him. His soldiers believed he was untouchable. And somewhere along the way, so did he. And a man who believes he cannot lose will eventually walk somewhere he should not go. He had one direction left. Northeast. Beyond the great rivers, beyond the last Persian fort, out past the edge of everything he understood, into the steppe.
The steppe was not a kingdom with walls and armies. It was not a city he could walk into, bow to the local gods, and call himself the liberator. It was a world with its own rules, its own warriors, its own way of fighting, and its own way of killing. And it was ruled by a widow. Her name was Tomyris. And if you have never heard that name before, that is exactly the problem this video is trying to fix. She ruled the Massagetae. Now, before you picture a small wandering tribe scratching at the dirt, stop. The Massagetae were not a tribe. They were a confederation, a vast network of nomadic clans spread across the Central Asian steppe, across what is now Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. They had no cities, no walls, no temples built from stone. What they had was horses. And on a horse, they were something the Persian army had never learned how to fight. And among the Massagetae, women did not stay behind while the men went to war. They rode, they fought, they led.
The Greeks who wrote about the steppe peoples were so astonished by this that they invented an entire mythology around it. The Amazons. The Amazons were not a fantasy. They were a misunderstanding. The Greeks saw women fighting on horseback and could not process it, so they turned it into a myth. Tomyris was not a myth.
Tomyris had become queen after the death of her husband. She had a son, Spargapaises. He commanded her armies in the field, while she ruled the confederation, held the alliances together, made the decisions that kept her people alive on one of the harshest landscapes on earth. She was not a queen who sat in a palace and waited for news from the front. She was the front. There is one more thing you need to know about the Massagetae. Something small. Something that, at this point in the story, barely seems worth mentioning. They did not drink wine. Wine was a Persian drink, a Greek drink, a Mediterranean drink. Out on the steppe, there were no vineyards, no grapes. The Massagetae drank fermented mare's milk. They used cannabis in their rituals. Wine to them was a foreign substance, something they had never encountered, something they had no tolerance for. Remember that. So this is who Cyrus was coming for. Not a weak king, not a crumbling city. A queen who had earned the loyalty of every clan on the steppe. A son who commanded her armies. A people who had been riding and fighting on this land for generations. And Tomyris knew he was coming. She had watched his empire expand for years, kingdom by kingdom, river by river, border by border, moving steadily northeast, moving toward her. The only question was what she would do about it. Cyrus did not begin with an army. He began with a letter. He had done this before.
When you have conquered as much as Cyrus had conquered, you learn that the cleanest victories are the ones that never require a battle at all.
The letter proposed marriage. Cyrus, the most powerful man alive, wished to make Tomyris, the queen of the Massagetae, his wife. On the surface, it was flattering. The greatest king in the world wanted her as his queen. But Tomyris understood something that Cyrus had perhaps forgotten. She was not just a woman. She was a ruler. And as Herodotus wrote, she saw through the proposal immediately. She understood that it was her kingdom he wanted, and not herself. She sent the messenger back. The answer was no. Cyrus received the refusal, and he did what men who have never been told no tend to do. He ordered his engineers to begin constructing a bridge across the Oasis River, the great natural border between his empire and his. The bridge was not a subtle message. It was a declaration. He was coming with everything he had.
When Tomyris learned that Cyrus was building his bridge, she sent him one final message. Not a plea, not a negotiation, a warning. She told him to stop the construction, to leave, to take his army and go back to his empire, which was already larger than any man deserved. And if he refused, she made him a promise. "Cease your efforts," she said. "Rule your own people, and allow me to rule mine. Refuse, and I swear by the sun, Lord of the Massagetae, bloodthirsty as you are, I will give you your fill of blood." Cyrus read the warning. He had been warned before. By kings, by advisors, by oracles who had told him in careful language that there were limits to what even he could take. He had ignored all of them, and he had been right every time. So he folded the letter, set it aside, and gave the order to finish the bridge. He had conquered kings. He had conquered cities. He had walked into Babylon, the greatest city in the world. And the gates had opened for him. And now, on the far side of a river, a woman on the steppe had told him he would drown in blood if he crossed it.
He crossed it anyway. And that is when Cyrus the Great made the worst decision of his life. Before Cyrus crossed, one of his advisors spoke up. Croesus, the former king of Lydia, the richest man alive, now serving the man who had conquered him. He said, "Don't fight them in the open steppe. You cannot win a battle on ground they have known their entire lives. Instead, let them defeat themselves." The plan was simple. Send a small force across the river. Let them be seen. Then retreat, leaving behind the camp, the tents, the food, and the wine. Jars and jars of it. More than an army could drink. Left behind as if abandoned in a panic.
Remember what I told you about the Massagetae? They had never tasted wine.
Spargapisus led his force into the camp. They had won. The Persians had fled. There was food, there was warmth, and there were these strange clay jars filled with something they had never encountered before. They drank, and then they drank more. By the time the Persians returned, Spargapisus and his men were barely standing. It wasn't a battle. It was a harvest.
Spargapisus was taken alive. When he sobered, when the wine cleared and he understood what had happened, he did not rage. He did not beg. He asked Cyrus for one thing: to have his chains removed. Cyrus agreed, and the moment his hands were free, Spargapisus took his own life. He could not return to his mother, having lost this way. He could not return at all. Tomyris received the news. Her son was dead. Not in battle, not with a sword in his hand and enemies in front of him. In a tent, in chains he had asked to be removed. Because of wine he had never tasted before. Left there for exactly that purpose. She sent Cyrus one final message. She called him a coward, not a conqueror. Then she gathered everything she had left.
The two armies met on the steppe.
Herodotus, the man who recorded this, called what followed the most violent battle ever fought between foreign nations. From the man who had witnessed the Persian Wars, Thermopylae, Salamis, Plataea, this was worse. The Persians knew how to fight armies. The Massagetae knew how to fight on the steppe.
Bows fired from horseback, lances, battle axes. No fixed formations to break, no walls to siege, just riders who had been born on this land, fighting for every inch of it. When it ended, the Persian army was gone. Not defeated, not retreating. Gone. The Massagetae took no prisoners. And then they searched the dead. They were looking for one man. They found him. Tomyris stood over the body of Cyrus the Great. The man who had never lost. The man who had built the largest empire in history. The man who had taken her son with wine and chains and a coward's trick. She had made him a promise. She kept it. She filled a wineskin with blood. She had the head of Cyrus cut from his body, and she plunged it in.
You wanted blood, she said. Drink.
There is something you should know. Herodotus himself, the man who recorded this story, admitted there were other accounts of how Cyrus died.
Some say he fell fighting a different tribe. One account says he died peacefully in his bed. We cannot know for certain.
What we do know is that Cyrus died in the northeast on the steppe in 530 BC, that the Massagetae defeated his army, and that Tomyris was there. The wineskin, that is the version Herodotus believed. And after everything she had been through, it is the version that feels true.
The Persian Empire did not collapse that day. Cyrus's son Cambyses took the throne. The empire survived for another 200 years. But Cyrus, the founder, the shepherd, was buried in a simple tomb at Massagetae. His empire outlasted him. His unbeaten record did not.
Hundreds of videos exist about Cyrus the Great. Almost none exist about the woman who killed him. Ask yourself why. History has always been a choice about whose story gets told, whose name gets remembered, whose victory gets a monument.
Tomyris got none of that. She got a footnote in Herodotus and 25 centuries of silence. Her name was Tomyris. She kept her promise. Remember it.